Hi, everybody. Welcome to Celestial You. Today, I wanted to go over how we can get through this dark time in humanity. I know that for sensitive souls everywhere and people of various states of awakening, that this has been a very challenging time. And for those of you who are awakened and holding space for others who are in the process of awakening, I thought today one of the best things I could do is show you guys the astrology of the files that were released. I'm going to do a prajna chart on these files, and I want to show you guys what the purpose of it is and how this is going to change humanity. And hopefully, in reviewing this, it will give you some larger perspective of what's happening. And I think that can really help to anchor us during this really kind of disturbing reality that we're in. So, without further ado, I'm going to show you some details about that day that the files were released. Okay, so this is the chart of when the files were released, January 30th, according to PBS at 6:35 p.m. Eastern Time. The Justice Department released over 3 million files. And during this time, the files were heavily redacted, but they were at least expressed to the public. And I wanted to take a look at the chart of when this happened, because by looking at the chart of it, you can do what's called a prajna chart. And what that is you can actually look to see what's going to happen, what's the meaning of this, and what does this kind of mean really to humanity, to the nation. And so starts out with this being Leo rising. So Leo rising is about leadership. It's about the kingdom, right? And Leo is often associated with expression, self-expression, uniqueness. It is an expression of what the leadership is doing. Now here, the sun that rules Leo is actually in Aquarius. So at this time, because of the stellium that was in Aquarius in the seventh house when this was released, this wasn't really so much about leadership as it was the community or the the group, the people essentially, because Aquarius represents more the common person. It's ruled by Saturn. Saturn happens to be in Pisces when this happened. And I'll go over that in a second, and that does have, it's meaningful to this release. But what's more meaningful is that you see here that the kingdom has no planets in it. There's no planets in Leo. All the planets are here. The sun that rules Leo is even here. So there's this tremendous amount of force that is coming from the collective. And it shows how the collective really was insistent that these files come out. And actually, if you look at it, since Saturn is ruling this entire house and Saturn is in the eighth house, this is about a crisis. This is about unseen taboo topics, and particularly because it's Pisces, it's government, it's mental health, its secrets, right? So here we have a situation that the government has held on to these secrets, and with the North Node here in Pisces, there has been this desire for the unknown to be made known. And of course, in the eighth house is the house of the occult. So if there were occult things happening, they were not good ones. I mean, they weren't like pagan fairy rituals of of love and blessings that were happening here, because wherever Saturn is, there is an element of disease, mental disease, particularly in Pisces, lying, deceiving. And here, the sheer force of the number of planets in Aquarius shows that the people use their collective force to see that these files were brought into the light, that they were brought into consciousness, and that they were not going to remain hidden. And I think, when the North Node is in a place like in Pisces, you do see cover-ups. You're going to see theft. You're going to see kind of the North Node can, especially with Saturn, it could be a situation where there's a great shadowing that has happened. However, in this case, because Saturn rules Aquarius and the people have decided that this isn't appropriate, like we need this exposed, we need to know what's happening. This has happened, and it's ruled by the sun here. And you also want to look at what planets are in yoga with the sun. I mean, they're all in yoga with the sun because they're in the same house, but in particular is Mars. Mars is in Ithisala with the sun, which means that Mars, being the planet of overcoming obstacles, being the planet of direct masculinity and force, right? So there seems to have been a forcing of the kingdom to over electronically. And then we also see Pluto here, and Pluto is the planet of transformation. So here we see that there's a transformation that's happening, and it's through the weight of the collective that we see this coming to light. And also, Saturn is actually in a yoga, or is within, I guess, touching distance with Mars here as well. And it shows me how important the will of the people is within this disclosure. So I want to say, like, if we are, as a collective, deeply disturbed by what's coming out, what these taboos are, that's okay. Just keep in mind that the process of unearthing this that's happening in this chart is happening because of the will of the people to transform, to transmute what is occurring. And that overall, the strength of the collective behind this issue is what allowed it to be unearthed, to be discussed, to be for justice to start to percolate. I mean, justice is going to be hard to affect. However, what I'm noticing is that it's first and foremost about getting the information out, because Aquarius is about, it's an air sign, it happens quickly, and it's about information and technology. I actually wanted to point this out too, for those of you that are having a hard time. there are those right now. There's a project underway. It's called, if you can go to the dot web with two B's .io, there's a new app that has been made specifically to search and connect data and investigate the files because there's just so many of them that it's difficult to investigate. So there's Ian Carroll was a part of getting that out to the public. And I think that really represents this, there's a lot of weight here. These two planets are benefic. The sun is incredibly capable of communicating direction and consciousness, and Mars is really the will. Mars is the will, particularly in this chart because Mars rules Aries here over the ninth cusp. And this has to do with the direction or the philosophy of the collective. And so that's kind of what is at large here. Mars, also with Neptune here, is doing what is in the highest interest of all of the collective, of all of humanity. And also Mars does rule Scorpio in the fourth. So this is the public. The fourth house in mundane astrology refers to the public. The seventh house refers to relationships. But it's also business relationships, it's trade, and it's foreign affairs. So this release is going to affect all of our foreign affairs. It's going to affect the stock market. I know that Pan Bondi came out and said, "Oh, the stock market's like doing so well." Well, these planets are there may be energy here and there may be a factor of abundance here with these planets, but the reality of what's happening is exposure. And so I think this is going to have far-reaching implications on trade. I think this is going to have far-reaching implications. I know that in certain countries like India, in Norway, they've already brought lawsuits forward. I know that the fourth house being the collective, the inner state of the populace, it's in Scorpio. So that means that this action is helping the collective to process what has really been happening in society. And this is in an effort to create transformation. So I think this is all, I know it doesn't look good, but this is the dismantling of what you could think of actually here at Pisces. You could think of it as dismantling the deep state or the secret governments and things like that. That's definitely happening here. And this is a way in which the will of the people is interfering with the deep state. And like you think about it, the balance between the people, the collective, and the leadership, Leo, and all the power is shifted to the collective. And why is that? Why? Like in the past, we wouldn't have never known. We weren't in the age of Aquarius. We wouldn't have known what was happening on a large scale. What this represents is how deeply we're becoming aware of these hidden, terrible crimes against humanity and criminals. And that's really what Saturn is representing in this eighth house, is the criminal element of the government. And really trying to expose this. We also see that the moon is in Cancer, which means the public, represented by the moon, is in a heart-centered space, a wholesome, a desire for wholesomeness, right? That's what really a desire for healing is all happening in Cancer. And you see Jupiter actually is in Cancer as well. So this is the public expanding their consciousness, their awareness, their ability to kind of feel what is going on. And this is 12th house, again, government. And you can see too that moon here is in yoga with in Ithasala with Venus actually. And so Venus is actually politicians. So there is this blessed sort of way in which the public is working with some politicians, and they're friendly politicians, actually, those that are carrying out this information dissemination, that are insisting on this. Rokana, Massey, Nancy, Nancy Grace, I think her name is, I forget, Nancy Mace, and others that made it possible to release this. This was a bipartisan effort, and it just shows the strength of the actual collective. So I want to highlight that there's a transformation happening because of the information we have access to in this age, that this is overall a very positive event, although horrific in its nature. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about what my guide Kendra said when I channeled on what was happening. And she said, take action to be brave and embody. Release the strategies and have faith that the collapse is necessary to balance what you cannot see of the outcome. We must forgive the imbalance of the moment. So, is it truly horrific? Yes, absolutely. I mean, I've actually gone in and read a lot of the files straight from the website, which you can do. I actually would recommend that when you hear someone reporting on it, that you just type those words in and make sure that it's a real file and do some due diligence. But what I see here in this chart is that it's Leo rising. So Leo is the lion, it's brave, right? This shows the bravery of the collective, the willingness to unearth what is corrupted in the system, the willingness. Eighth house is wars, but it's also the crisis, or a situation where we're willing as a collective to allow for the collapse of the governing bodies in order for something more aligned with our collective to come out of Aquarius. And this does align with when Pluto went into Aquarius. We have about 20 years with Pluto being in Aquarius. We just started that. And so I believe it was last year that happened. And so we are well on our way to transforming the collective and to bringing power back to the people, because Pluto is power. It's could be power, could be the ways in which we've been manipulated, but coming back into your power is often what happens when Pluto goes through a sign. And so over the next 19 years or so, and probably faster than that. I do see a lot of this being hashed out earlier just because Aquarius moves so quickly. So it's like the next until 2030 or so. We're going to see a total transformation of our government and our systems. But we need to see the degradation and the release and the of old systems. And so these systems here, represented by Pisces, which represents governments, institutions, and things like that, because there's this desire to know more about what's wrong with those systems, and it's happening in a way that, you know, the systems keep lying. They keep being confronted and they keep lying. And really, this is independent of one political party versus another. If you really look at it critically and are able to step back, this has been going on for a very long time. And this has been, whether it's whatever administration we were in, this network, this mob, this mafia was going on. They were doing these abuses and they're still doing them. And so we have to see what it is so that we can create systems that that dismantle this criminal element within our society, these abuses within our society. And looking at this release actually gives me a lot of hope. And I wanted to bring that to you too. There is a world where we are aware that these things are happening. And we're so lucky that this information has come out. We're so lucky that we live in a time where the collective has access to this information, and with this information can make different decisions. And absolutely, the collective can band together. This is really about, Saturn's actually not all bad. Saturn in Pisces does pull people together around the hard truths, the truly divine truth of it all, the unfabricated, no nonsense truth of it all. And so this represents a way in which we can unite as people to make changes. And that's exactly what this is showing, in that it's divine, and that our heart is in the right place, and that humanity can grow past this because of the planets here in Cancer that are aspecting this house, and how the collective is now really looking for wholesomeness and looking for better emotional, mental well-being, and really understanding that we have to overcome this in order to get there. Lastly, I wanted to say how proud I am of the people who are just now waking up to what's happened. I know that many more people awakened during the pandemic, and and some people were already awakening in 2012, back in 2016. I know I was more awakening in 2020 myself, becoming aware of all this stuff that's been confirmed by the release of the files. And I just wanted to say, I want to commend humanity for being brave during this time, because when we look back on this, that bravery, that optimism is going to be what allows us to do courageous things as a collective. That's how we're going to change society. It's not by getting blackpilled. It's not by getting political and fighting your neighbors. You know, your neighbors are not the problem. Your neighbors are human, and they are probably a product of their algorithm and what information they're consuming. That's why I highly recommend that when folks are vilifying one political party or another and reporting, that you just go ahead and do your own research, find various different sources, and actually just go look at the files yourself. That's what I've been doing. I have found some misreporting happening, but I've also just found some people, namely the older generations, unwilling to even recognize the disclosure of the files, feeling overwhelmed by the gravity of the darkness. I mean, that's a general theme anyway. And I wanted to say that for those of us who've known about this for longer, the release of these files is oddly a relief to us. I know for myself, I've been feeling this darkness, but feeling very kind of alone or ostracized by knowing about these things before they were released, before they were recognized. And it's still going to be the case that the boomer generation, the elder generation, is still unwilling to witness the files. So I'm not saying you should go out there and consume all this information all the time. But what I'm saying is, I am proud of you for having the bravery to wade into the collective shadow, to the shadow of the ruling class. Because I think when we have that level of bravery, when we are able to hold space for the deepest of darkness, that should convince you that there is also much greater potential for light in this world. The fact that such evil exists, right, should convince you, as it has to me. And this is why it's a relief. I'm like, thank God people know now what's happening. Why we were covering this up, you know, out of shame as a collective, that's not going to happen anymore. You know, we stand the greatest chance of intervening on behalf of those abused in this moment where our parents, where our grandparents could not have known. They could not have known and they could not have intervened, right? But we have this ability. I'm not saying go into the files and consume a bunch of negative information that disheartens you, but work on being able to sit with the discomfort of what's happening, because it's happening. It hasn't stopped happening, right? But working on sitting with that emotion and sitting with your own fear, right? Because on the flip side of that fear is courage, right? It's love, it's courage, right? So we can only do that if we're willing to witness the degradation. Not that you have to stay in it, but just witness it and acknowledge it, because it's by being honest that we can shed light on these things and that we can change our lives, the lives of the collective, and eventually our government. So thank you for joining me and have a really awesome day. Bye.